1950s, which were actually the golden age of filmmaking in Malaya, two film companies, Cathay and Shaw Brothers, produced one horror movie every...
Anh thử nắm tay lại rồi bật lần lượt các nón ra xem.
Sorry. They actually produced one horror film every month, okay? And this was part of an ongoing program. The Shaw Brothers were actually the largest distributors of Malayan film during this period. And they actually had a fleet of vans that would go as far north as Kango, Malaysia, to deliver Malay films to remote locations and plantations on a weekly circuit. They were actually taking these Malay films to Borneo and Brunei. They had a shipping schedule to actually do that. These were films that were so popular that black marketeers would snap up tickets during the release of a popular show and then resell them at 3 times the original ticket price. Even though these Malay films were quite B-grade in comparison to the Hollywood films that were coming out, they were really popular with the Malay audience, whose enjoyment of the familiar local folk tales featuring spirits, ghosts, etc. allowed them to dismiss any kind of technical or narrative inconsistencies. My question is, well, why can't Malay language films be equally as popular today? And really it's because it's become a fractured region, because of post-colonial and colonial tensions. The popularity of Malay language films across the Malay Peninsula during the 1950s attests to audience demands for films that tell local stories in a local language or vernacular. While the popularity of Malay films were limited to geographical shipping regions of the 1950s, today's sophisticated global courier services, satellite broadcast services, and an ever-diasporic Malaysian, Indonesian, Singaporean and Brunei population ensures that the Malay language film would continue to have a large audience. For example, with the Filipinos, and the Filipinos do this very well, they have an estimated 7.5 million Filipinos who live abroad, live outside the Philippines. And these working Filipinos foster and support the global distribution of films from their countries, and also a cable satellite service from their local television station, ABN. So it can be done, and the Philippines has shown us that. A film which actually shares popularity with both a local and diasporic audience is Vietnamese films. And we're about to look at a film that was screened at this week's ASEAN Film Festival called Jackfruit Thorn Kiss. It has another title called 1735, a fabulous film by a guy called Nguyen Dam Tuan. And it was really popular in the US festivals. Now the Vietnamese film industry has actually undergone a bit of a revival since the early 2000s. And this happened during 2002 when the Ministry of Information and Culture actually abolished the pre-filming censorship of scripts. They no longer vetted scripts before they went to production. And they've also allowed for the first time private production companies, film production companies. And the film that we're going to see actually came out of one of those first initiatives from a private film production company. Even the state-run Liberation Film Company led the revival in 2003 with a film called Gai Ngai, which is Bar Girls. And it was the first film, it's really a realistic drama of everyday life, based on bar girls, performing bar girls. And it's quite different because up to this time, a lot of the films that came out of Vietnam were actually focused on the war. So this was quite a dramatic change. Now, the film grossed over $300,000 US in the first 3 months since its release, which is an enormous amount of money from Vietnam. And it was a huge achievement for a film that was actually made on $70,000 US. Now, this film actually became a cult classic also in the US because of what was a very large diasporic Vietnamese population over there. And, they're basically, you can find fan websites about it, etc. Now, again, this reflects the importance of promoting local stories in local languages and, confident in the belief that there is a native-speaking and non-native speaking audience for these films. So what is a national cinema if it doesn't have a national audience? One of the films that we can talk about is Song of the Stork, a Singapore film made by listed on the Singapore Film Commission's website. One of the first films that were made as a which is about the Vietnam War, but it hasn't been released in Singapore to date as a box office film, general release, because basically statistics show us that Singaporeans want to watch films about Singapore. In 2002, Grand Prix Productions' I Not Stupid was the fourth most popular film in the Singapore box office. Okay, that's after some really very big Hollywood names. While Home Run was in the top 10 in 2003. These films, all directed by Jack Neo, following his success with Money Not Enough in 1998, which was the all-time highest-grossing Singapore film, and fifth in the all-time top 5 films, including US films. Neo's box office successes are arguably definitive Singaporean films made in Singapore for Singaporeans using Singapore content, talent, financing and expertise. Now this is very interesting, defining that relationship between local audiences and local films. In 1999 there was a survey done by Nanyang Business School at Nanyang Technological University, and it identified 6 critical factors that audiences wanted in films, okay, and how important these were to audiences. Now this survey actually discovered that local audience preferences included the use of Singlish, the incorporation of local identity markers such as local stars and locations, stories classified as PG, and films that had been supported by government film agencies. Singaporean audiences are not interested in the budget of the film or whether it looks like a big budget film, and Return to Pontiac is a great example of that. They prefer local references audiences rather than universal references in films. The reason for this, O'Regan tells us, is because audiences recognise themselves in films and use films to create their understanding of their nation, specifically what citizens make up their nation and what makes sense of what they and their society is aiming to become. Interestingly enough, very similar thing has been shown by Eric Khoo's films. Now, Eric Khoo's made Me Coke Man, 12 Stories. He's one of Singapore's most renowned filmmakers because his films do really well at international film festivals. In 2005, Khoo's Be With Me was very successful at the Cannes Film Festival. It was the opening night of the 37th Directors Fortnight at Cannes. But its story, you wouldn't think would appeal to anybody outside Singapore, but it still does. It's about Teresa Chan, a deaf and blind woman, whose story inspired this particular film. Be With Me actually supports that proposition that local movies about local subjects hold currency that's not only exportable to transnational audiences, but also is very important in consolidating a national audience. Okay, so language, local narratives, and local stories, I believe, are important. We should encourage and foster that. What about our local locations? What about the Malay, Indonesian, Singaporean, Brunei locations? Now, Australia and New Zealand have actually done this very successfully. The representation of the physical beauty of their landscapes in films like Mad Max series, The Matrix, The Lord of the Rings, are some of the many international movies that have used these antipodean locations that contributed to their success. Now, 2 films that actually utilise the natural beauty or cityscapes of the country to capture international audiences include the Vietnamese film Jackfruit, Thorn Kiss, and another one from Indonesia that I was hoping to show you but we can't get today, called Jani Johnny. These films use a common motive, and then in this particular common motive, the film's protagonists travel through the country and city, maximising the cinematic potential of the nation's geography. Let's have a look at an example of this, where the main character, Jackfruit Thornkiss, or the 2 main characters, get onto an old motorbike. And the whole film's like this, whether it's on a train or on a